Welcome to another inspiring episode of the Elite Expert Insider Podcast. Hosts Melanie Johnson and Jenn Foster are the owners of Elite Online Publishing. They're both Wall Street Journal, USA Today best-selling authors. We're really glad you're here because this podcast was designed for you. Meet industry experts that share their secrets and strategies. Get successful results for your business in money, relationships, health, and your life. Each episode is going to inspire you to take action towards reaching your greatness.
Hi, everyone. This is Melanie Johnson, along with my business partner at Elite Online Publishing, Jenn Foster. Hey, Jenn.
Hey, everyone. It's an amazing day today.
All right. Well, we have a great show. First of all, remember to subscribe to our show and pass it on to your friends and share it. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave us any comments that you have. All right. I am a huge fan of this author, John Warrillow. He wrote the book Built to Sell, and he has a new book coming out, The Art of Selling Your Business, along with Automatic Customers. So first of all, we love him. Oh, and by the way, he has another one called Drilling for Gold. So we love him because he's written so many books. As you know, that we're a publishing company, so we just love our authors. And he's going to really dive deep on how do you sell your business and how do you prepare it to get ready to sell and to sell it for max amount of money. And by the way, that whole journey that he's going to teach us to go through, it actually makes your business better and, make it more profitable. Who doesn't want to do that? John, thanks so much for coming today.
Hey, thanks. Good to be with you both.
Great. Well, John, tell us a little bit how you got started in this and you started your first business and how you became this successful author.
I used to run a quantitative market research company. It was the businesses I started before writing Built to Sell. And I built it up to a relatively good size, but I think we were 6 million in revenue, 5 or 6 million in revenue, like 30 employees. And we're profitable because it was a service business, 20 or 30% profit margin. And I was kind of under the impression that would be a really valuable company one day. We had these great clients. We had American Express was a customer. We had Bank of America, Google, all these great customers. And I went to see an M&A guy in Toronto one day. His name's Perry Miele. I'll never forget the meeting. I said, I kind of rubbing my hands together. I said, what do you think it's worth, Perry? And he said, well, it kind of depends on the answer to a couple of questions. I said, shoot. And he said, well, you're in the research business. So who does the research? And I said, well, I guess I do a little bit. I'm involved in these big customers, right? And he said, all right, well, who does the selling? I'm like, if it's Bank of America, they want me to show up, right? And he's like, all right. So you got a research company where you do the research, you do the selling. And I could feel the blood draining from my face. And he's like, I'm like, yeah. And he peers over his nose at his tortoiseshell glasses at me and says, John, there's nothing, I can't sell your business. There's nothing to sell here. It's worthless. And I remember that day, like it was yesterday, it was like being punched in the stomach because I thought going into his meeting, I was sitting on this gold mine, right? That customers would, acquirers would want to buy this, profitable business with all these great clients. But what he taught me that day was that it really wasn't worth much to anybody as long as it was dependent on me. And that kicked off this journey. We transformed that company, made it a subscription model, got other people doing the selling. Ultimately, it was acquired by a New York Stock Exchange listed company. So it has sort of a happy ending, but it started my journey at a very low point. And that was that meeting with Perry.
I'm hearing you say you can't be the person doing everything. And I always equate that to, it's like a football game. Like you can't be the player on the field. You shouldn't even be the coach on the sidelines. You need to be the owner up in the skybox. Right. And how do you take yourself out of that and transition out of that and know that you can? It's scary because you're like, oh, I got to pay these people. Right. What if I can't, or they're not the right people? And then I've invested money into them and they're not the right people. And I got to start over again. And now I might be going out of business because I've spent too much money. It's that scary part. How do you transition and do that?
Yeah, look, I think there's some practical ways and there's a philosophical way. Practically speaking, it's funny. I just got off a podcast literally about 10 minutes ago. I do this thing called Built to Sell Radio where I interview different entrepreneurs. I interviewed a woman named Jody Cook who sold her company in a social media advertising agency. And social media agencies generally sell using an earnout where the buyer effectively provides the money to buy the business over time if you meet certain goals in the future. Jody got 100% of her company at closing or cash at closing, no earnout, which is, again, unheard of in the marketing services. But how did she do it? Well, she documented her processes for getting out of her company. So she went through and looked at 50 different things that people did in her company. She kept a log of every time someone came to her with a question, and she said, aha, I've got to figure out how to get this information into somebody else's hands. She created a manual for her company. These 50 different processes were all documented. And over time, she got it so that she really was not doing much of the work anymore. And so she went to an acquirer and said, look, you can buy this business. I'm going to give you the manual. And it's kind of just add water recipe. You don't need me. And she made that case and got out of her business without an earnout, which is like a prison sentence for most entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, in Built to Sell, I read that book and you go through that. Like if you don't have your systems and processes documented, then you really don't have a business because you are doing it all yourself. So when you document those systems and processes, then it's easy to turn it to someone else because they can just follow the guide, right? Follow the recipe. So I think that's
exactly right, Jen.
key.
And I think there's two things that you really need to focus on. One is the kind of internal plumbing, what Dan Sullivan refers to as behind the scenes or backstage. That's all the stuff like, how do we run payroll? How do we, how do we open the store in the morning? Like that stuff needs to be documented, but also, and arguably even more importantly, how do you win customers? So what's the marketing engine? What's the sales funnel look like? How do you get people from kind of coming to your website down to becoming a customer? That also needs to be documented as well with an equal level of detail.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's, and that isn't, it's when you ask that question, it's like, how do I, like every time you have a question or something, make sure you make a system right after that or put it down to have a system. How do you know what your business is worth? Like, let's say you have the systems documented. How do you value your business?
Yeah, valuation consultants are all over the world, and there's many of them in every city in the world, and they will kind of pull out their pencil protector, their pocket protector, their pencil out of their pocket protector, and they will kind of spin their propeller head and they will give you a detailed number of exactly what your company is worth. And in theory, that is in fact what your company is worth. And I emphasize the word theory. In reality, your business can be worth many times that or a fraction of that, because really beauty's in the eye of the beholder and value is in the eye of the acquirer. It doesn't make sense to put a value on your company. I'll give you an example. I did an interview for Built to Sell Radio with a guy named Chris Jones, and Chris built a company called Pepper Jam. Great business. And he got a call from a guy named Michael Rubin. And Michael Rubin is like a tech luminary, sold his company for PayPal, like $1 billion kind of deal, massive guy. And so Chris goes into Michael Rubin's office expecting that he's going to have this sort of one-on-one tete-a-tete, this sort of meeting of the minds. And unbeknownst to Chris, Michael Rubin is not alone. On his left shoulder is his chief financial officer, and his right shoulder is his head legal counsel. And without even really exchanging much in the way of pleasantries, Rubin asked Chris, well, what do you want for Pepper Jam? And Chris is like, I don't know. It's not what I came here to do. I had no idea you were going to ask me that. And he said, no. What do you want to sell your company for? How much do you want to sell your company for? And Chris blurted out a number, and Rubin at that moment looked at his chief financial officer and said, okay, I think we can get a deal done. And what Rubin was saying in not so many words was, don't pay a dime more than that number and make it your job to buy that business for less than that number. And so, putting a value on your business, whether it's through a valuation consultant or just, arbitrarily kind of putting a number on your business, I think always shoot yourself in the foot. You're effectively putting a ceiling on which your business is worth. And again, it could be worth many multiples of that, depending on who sees it and what they view as the strategic value in your company.
That's so true.
Yeah, so true. Well, tell us, so after you kind of know what your business is worth or what you want to sell your business for, when is the best time to sell your business?
It's a great question. I think the answer is when you reach the freedom point is when you should pull up and at least ask yourself, is now the right time? The freedom point is when the sale of your company combined with what other liquid assets you've created outside of your company combine into a nest egg big enough that will allow you to live for the rest of your life. And I think when you reach that point, when your company is worth that amount of money that you could create a nest egg to fund the rest of your life, I think it's just worth asking yourself, am I willing to effectively trade something I want, financial freedom, for something I may not want, which is the next tranche of growth, the next dozen employees, the next million in sales? Because, I think it was Buffett who said, it's insane to trade what you want, financial freedom, for something you don't. And the moment, your business becomes a significant asset in your wealth picture, and it's a big part of your, overall wealth, you're effectively like that kind of Vegas gambler who just kind of keeps putting all the chips on the table. Every single day you're owning your company, you're risking that wealth. And I think we all, run this risk of kind of riding it over the top. I'm reminded of a guy named Rand Fishkin, who I interviewed. He wrote a great book called Lost and Found. I don't know if you've ever read it, but he built Moz, which is a SEO software, great little software, built it up to 5 million in sales, was growing, expected to get to 10 the next year, when he got an offer from HubSpot for $25 million of cash and stock. A guy named Brian Halligan made the offer. And Fishkin thought, well, maybe my business is worth, it could be as much as 4 times revenue, and we're expecting to get to 10. So he turned him down. Even $25 million for a $5 million business, he said, no, I think it's worth 40. And Halligan said, well, we're not paying that. And he decided not to take the deal. And he went and raised money from venture capitalists. The VCs eventually screwed up the business. Long story short, they removed Rand from the company. When I interviewed him on Built to Sell Radio, I said, what was that deal worth now? And he said, well, first of all, my shares in Moz are not worth much anymore because the way the VCs invested. That Halligan offer from HubSpot of $25 million of cash in HubSpot stock, based on the appreciation of HubSpot stock, would be worth something near $200 million today.
Wow.
That's called riding it over the top. When we think tomorrow is always going to be better, right? It's always going to be one more sale we're going to make, or one more product we're going to launch, or one more customer we're going to win. And we never know when the next pandemic is going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think when you reach the freedom point, and you say, if I sell this thing, I wouldn't have to work again. I think it's at least asking yourself the question, is now the right time?
Yeah.
I think it's that, would I have to work again? Because we have a 3rd generation insurance company that my family comes from. And my brother tells me, well, if I sell, then I've got to manage my money. Right. That's a different job. I know my business, I know what it's going to generate. It's pretty reoccurring, all that kind of stuff. So then it opens really a whole new business for me of how do I manage this money and make sure I don't lose it and make sure it continues to generate wealth. So that's the scary part of jumping in, I think, on the other part.
Yeah. And we've seen that again and again. We actually at Value Builder did a bunch of research into why owners regret their decision to sell their company. And not surprising, a lot of it comes down to some of the financial stuff, like they feel like they left money on the table, they got out negotiated or whatever. But there's another interesting factor, and it's a little softer, but I think it's even more important. And that is that they were all push and no pull. Push factors are things that push you out of your company. They're, tax, legislation, regulations, employees, et cetera. They're all frustrations that all of us have as entrepreneurs. Pull factors are the things you're excited to go do next. Mm-hmm. Write a book, travel, get fit, whatever is the kind of thing on the horizon. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that when owners have more pull factors than push, they end up being very satisfied with their exit. One of the guys I interviewed for Built to Sell Radio was a guy named Sean Oshman. Years ago, I interviewed him. He was a guy based in Denver, built a little IT services company, a couple $1 million in revenue. And on his 39th birthday, he made a commitment to himself that he would, by 40, live life on a sailboat. Here he is in landlocked Denver, right? There's not water for 1,000 miles. He's like, I'm going to live my life on a sailboat. So he decides he's got to sell his company. It's not a big company, couple $1 million in revenue, gets a broker. He sells it for 2.5 times, I think 2.6 times profit. And I interviewed him on a show, and I'm like, Sean, that's a great outcome, but it's not like hitting it out of the park. It's not a home run. It's a good solid single in a baseball analogy, but it's certainly not, a home run. And he said, yeah, but John, you don't understand. I'm like, well, what don't I understand? He's like, I live on a sailboat. And it's always sort of stuck with me as a really good reminder that one of the secrets to having a great exit has nothing to do with the value you get. It's to having a really clear sense of what's next. right? For him, for Sean, it was living life on a sailboat. But I think getting really clear on that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I really think that is, because I run into business owners all the time where, especially in, retail or that kind of thing, where they built this company, they've worked for 40 years and they're like, oh, I'll retire when I'm this age. And then they don't build the systems and processes, so they can't sell their business. And when they exit, they don't really have that vision or that goal, because they're like, well, we'll just have, my 401k, or I'll just have my Roth or whatever they have. They don't have any income. And so it's really sad because they don't have that vision like you're talking about. So if you know what your company's worth and when you want to sell it, but you have the vision of why you want to sell it, then it doesn't really matter your valuation or how much you sell your company for. I love that.
Yeah. And I think so many of us are sort of inert. We like in the early days, it's all new and it's exciting and we've got to get it done. And like, there's the sense of urgency, right? It's like panic, it's survival times, right? And then if you reach a certain point, maybe like the retailer you're describing, Jen, where it's the kind of business is, it's successful. It's maybe not growing very quickly, but it's, it's successful, and kind of, you just become inert, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of get lulled into a sense of sort of security. And I think it's such a shame when that happens, because so many of us will achieve much more success in our second, third, and fourth business than we do in our first, right? Mm-hmm. I've referred to it, and it's a bit of a pejorative way. I can't think of a better way of saying it, but some people talk about it as your training wheel business, right? Your first or second is where you figure it all out, right? That's where you kind of learn how to run a company. But in many cases, it's better to take that business, realize a little bit of value for it, and take what you've learned and build another business where you build it in a more scalable way, et cetera. And so I think it's a shame when people become, as you described, Jen, like kind of inert, and they spend 40 years in the same business. Oh, I'll be happy when I retire. Well, maybe they'd be happy if they were doing something new and fresh and different and creative. Maybe that requires actually selling that retail shop or whatever, business you started. So in any event, it's a philosophical question. I think a lot of folks have to answer themselves.
In your book, Automatic Customer, like you're saying, like, hey, if you transition to another business, it's to make it where you have that subscription base. It's so popular now. I mean, they're doing it with almost everything is becoming subscription. So How do you, like we were talking about our business, how do we make that a subscription business? How do you turn something on its ear that wasn't subscription and make it subscription? And it's really kind of two questions. To me, it's the easy part of setting it up, right? All the technical stuff. Here's what we're going to offer. Here's how all the back end and the tech and the website and all that stuff. But then how do you get customers to sign up for it and stay there, have the retention?
Yeah. Let me start by telling you what I think is the biggest mistake owners make in trying to transition from a transactional business model or billing by the hour, by the day, whatever, to a subscription business model. And I think the biggest mistake is they try to kind of jury rig an offering that's going to appeal to all of their customers. And that's almost a recipe for a diluted, crappy subscription model. Mm. The opposite, though, I think, is where you want to go. Instead of starting to dream about how you would, bill for your services on a subscription model, segment your customers by buying trigger or buying behavior. Really think deeply about what it is that your customers are looking for from you, like why they came to you, and really understand their underlying need. And segment them into homogeneous segments, buckets, if you will, right? So these guys or these gals all had the same need, or these folks had the same need. And then start the process of trying to understand for each of those homogeneous segments, what a subscription might look like. I'll give you an example. H. Bloom is a company that sells flowers. And if you sell flowers, it's a crappy business model, right? Like you have a flower store, you buy, flowers, they start to rot the moment the farmer cuts the flower. A month later, they have to garbage. Some typical flower store throws out half of its inventory. Mother's Day, Valentine's Day is when we buy flowers. The rest of the year, no one buys any flowers. And so you kind of manufacture demand. It's a terrible business model. And along come these two guys, Sonyu Panda, Brian Burkhardt are the names in New York. And they're like, we're gonna sell flowers, but we're gonna do it on subscription. And instead of trying to build a flower subscription, which would be relatively easy, but no one would buy, they first segmented like, who are all the people who buy flowers? Well, we buy flowers for, again, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, weddings, funerals, graduations, et cetera. Then they stumbled onto a very small segment of the flower buying population who buy flowers for a different reason. Hotels, 4 and 5-star hotels buy flowers because they want that bouquet of fresh cut flowers on their reception table. Why? Because it makes the whole experience look like a boutique, sort of higher end experience. Those hotel managers don't want to go down to the flower store and buy flowers. And so Brian Burkhart and Sonia Panda built a subscription just for hotels who want to buy flowers. Their proposition was simple. We'll drop off the flowers, we'll dispose of the old ones, we'll send you a commercial grade invoice, because after all, you're a business, not a consumer. And they built out a flower subscription company. Typical lifetime value of an H Bloom subscriber is more than $4,500. Compared to like the average transaction in a flower store is like $50. They didn't try to create a subscription company for people who buy flowers. They first segmented their whole entire universe of people who buy flowers and tried to find a homogeneous need. And it was actually a very small segment, but it was the one that they built their business around. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that micro niche inside your company. Because you have lots of customers, but you need that micro niche. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Awesome. I love that. I want to talk more about the automatic customer, because that's just such great content. That's great content. So in your book, Automatic Customer, you subscription base, and let's talk about the retention. Like, how do you keep them? Like, I guess the hotel company you're talking about, they're just going to keep renewing no matter what.
Yeah. It's all about onboarding. I don't want to say I shouldn't say it's all about onboarding. There are lots of reasons that people churn, and you're right in identifying retention as being the number one driver of any subscription company's valuation or success in any measure. And so what you really want to do is kind of get obsessed with retention. And what I have found, and what we saw in the research for the Automatic Customer book, is that the first 60 days of your relationship with a subscriber, the onboarding window, is the biggest predictor of how long they will stay with you. And so if there's any way that you want to really, or anything you want to focus on as a subscription company offering, is choreographing that first 60 days of the relationship. I'll give you an example. Gail Goodman built Constant Contact, the email marketing software guys. Mm-hmm. In the early days, they had a churn problem. And the churn problem was because they had a bunch of engineers running the company. And for engineers, they kind of think very linearly, right? So they're like, okay, well, when we kind of sign up a new customer, we need to kind of take them through a who, what, when kind of onboarding experience, right? So the first step in their experience was, okay, welcome to Constant Contact. Thank you for signing up. We have to send an email newsletter to your customers. So upload your CVS file, or whatever they call them, CVV file. Can't even remember. Excel spreadsheet, your Outlook file, whatever. And what do most small business owners do? Flower shop owners, butchers, whatever. They're like, what's a CSV file? I don't know how to upload and kind of marry up these columns with these widths, and how do I match? And they churn out, right? Before they even started learning about the software, they churn out. And so they had an astronomical churn rate. And so Goodman, to her credit, just kind of rethought this onboarding experience. And she's like, we've got to change this from who, what, when to what, who, when. Mm-hmm. And so they changed it. So that your first thing you do now when you sign up for Constant Contact, like, welcome to Constant Contact. Let's build your first newsletter. You're a flower store owner? Fantastic. Look, we've got these 6 flower store owner templates you can choose from. We've got all the stock library of all these roses and carnations you can insert into the offer. Let's build your first email campaign. And of course, the business owner is saying, this is great. Look how great and pretty my company's going to look. Oh my gosh, they have the stock photograph. Oh, this is going to be incredible. And it's coming to life in front of them, right? And all of a sudden, they're emotionally getting wedded to the software. And then at the end, they're like, okay, great. This looks fantastic. It's time for us to figure out who to send it to. And this part of the process isn't that fun. There's a speed bump in the way. And here's our 800 number if you get stuck, but we got to upload your CSV file. But by that time, they had emotionally bedded in, connected to the software. And it was enough relationship equity to get them over the top. Long story short, they cut their churn rate, and the rest is history. It became a massively successful company. But the first 60, 90 days of that relationship you have with the customer is what is going to define their retention over the long term.
All right, I want to dive into, you've written so many books, and obviously we're a publishing company. What motivated you to write the books, and what was your writing process to get it done? Because so many authors get stuck, right? That they have the idea, they want to do it, but then they just can't get it onto paper.
Yeah. I mean, The Art of Selling Your Business is the new book, and it was inspired by the podcast I do, Built to Sell Radio. And I've done it now for 6 years. I've interviewed 300 or something entrepreneurs. And what I came to learn is that there is a segment of owners, entrepreneurs, who punch well above their weight when it comes to selling their company. I mean, they seem to be, at least at me, kind of almost following a different hymn book or a different playbook. Mm-hmm. They've sold for multiples of revenue, not multiples of profit. I mean, it's like, it was really fascinating to me. So I really wanted to understand, like, what do they do? And so I started to try to codify, listening back to these interviews with these entrepreneurs that are punching above their weight, the kind of their process, the way they think about selling their business. And I came to understand that although there is science to it, there's a lot more art to it. There's a lot more about how you deftly handle the negotiation, how you position your business to maximize its attractiveness. And so I wanted to kind of document that process. And that's what sort of inspired The Art of Selling Your Business book. My process is, I'm halfway decent for about 45 minutes first thing in the morning on lots of coffee. So if you give me 2 French roast coffees, I can string together about 500 words that might make some sense to somebody. After 45 minutes, I'm a basket case. I don't even know my own name. I mean, I need a lobotomy. After 45 minutes, I'm done. But 45 minutes at about 5 a.m. with 2 strong coffees, yeah, there's a window there. Sure. And I just forced myself, and I've done this for all 3 of my books, to write for a few hundred words, as many as 400 or 500 words in that window every single day. And I didn't let my email or anything else sort of get in the way. It's that 45-minute window. And I didn't let anything kind of disturb that time. And that's my process. And after 100 days of doing that, you kind of have a book, or at least 40,000 words, which you can kind of make into a book later.
Great. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Where can people go to find you? Where can they get more information about you and your books?
Yeah, actually, we put together a little landing page for your listeners. You can go to builttosell.com/elite. And there's a whole bunch of gifts there. So if you opt in, there's the 9 subscription model checklist that you can go through that helps you identify which of the 9 subscription models that might be interesting to your company or might apply to your company. We built a workbook that sort of corresponds with, or sort of a sister publication to the actual book, The Art of Selling Your Business. So you can grab that there. There's a bunch of videos on drivers of value. It's all free. So it's just builttosell.com/elite.
Great.
Love that. And you know what else I love? I want to say you did your book by we're really big on repurposing your content when you write a book. And you took all those podcasts and repurposed the content into a book. So, which is
I must have been listening.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be such heavy listing. You already had most of the book done with all the podcast interviews. So we love that. So we want to remind you, if you're looking to write a book and publish a book, reach out to us at Elite Online Publishing. We guarantee our authors will hit #1 bestseller. And remember to subscribe to our podcast and share it. And we'll see you next time.
Great. Bye.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.